Good afternoon. In this video, I'd like to address the nature of the addictive mind, the conceptual mind, or the mind that is addicted to concepts, let's say. Concept, of course, being any temporal association of thought forms or consecutive thought forms put together to produce some kind of conscious phrasing of identity-based references. And the human mind loves identity-based references. It helps to locate the idea of what I think I am as this bodily identity in relationship to the particulars of the situations, events, and relationships I find myself in a world where everything seems to be separate from me in one way or another, as either being a separate individual, which is false, we'll get to that, or a situation that may have nothing to do with me, false also. And if you're a spiritual student, let's say, or an aspirant of truth, you've probably come across the idea of the dream or the illusion or the matrix. If you're a bit more scientific, perhaps quantum field theory, where I think, what are we in now, February 2023, I don't think science has discovered anything in their Hadron Collider yet that's smaller than the Higgs boson, although I think they are theorizing that there must be a point of origin for the existence of such a thing, and the Higgs boson, of course, being the smallest particle of readily proven to be what it is that makes up everything in the physical nature of life. So if you're familiar with the idea of the dream, perhaps, that I'm, let's say, asleep in eternity, or asleep in the formless realm, in the spirit realm, dreaming of myself as being here, experiencing myself as this physical avatar, this body, this vessel, with a conscious component of mind, able to pick and choose from the yin-yang of what I'm educated with at birth, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, the mine and yours, etc., to construct conceptual association in an attempt to ongoingly, if that's a word, validate my form association, to keep me completely preoccupied with the belief that I'm separate from everyone and everything else, as this form association, as this body, doomed to die, as all bodies are doomed to die, apparently. But very simply, that's not true. So spiritual premises outline a argument for oneness, for the singular nature of life, as above in eternity, so on earth, wherein what I think I see around me is not separate from me, is not something else that doesn't concern me over there, or is not some other person that needs to be healed or changed or anything out there. And as I go through the processes of realigning my thinking, or examining my thinking at first in regard to that, and making some experiments with the nature of my cause and effect relationships based on the re-examination of that thinking from separation to singularity, I can very simply prove to myself that the nature of life actually is singular. How, you might ask? I'm glad you asked. Speaking to myself, finger on my nose. Very, very simply, if you've ever read the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, I very much prefer the uncorrected, unedited, unrevised first edition, if you are still able to get it, where the concept or the idea of the mirror, which nowadays a lot of people like to call it shadow work, but the mirror is brought into play. Now, the mirror is something where, from the perspective of being, let's say, someone, albeit seemingly separate from other someones, suddenly desires to discover for themselves whether they are actually separate from other people or whether they're actually connected somehow with everything and everyone, or one with everything. I shouldn't say connected because that implies separate parts, but actually one with everything. The mirror is a very useful tool. The mirror says that what I see in someone else is something I either approve of or deny in myself. Now, in the yin-yang nature of human life, of course, we like to have all the good stuff in our own periphery, in our own awareness of ourselves, whatever we define good to be. Just because 1,000 people tell us good is this, that doesn't mean that, there's all sorts of quirky people out there and quirky ideas and quirky experiences that you can get into and discover what's good for you. Right? But in general terms, we like to bring to ourselves more of what we consider good or for our own greater good, and keep at bay or defend ourselves from things that we think might harm us or bring us into some kind of necessity to have to change our perspective on life to accommodate for it. And I should get to the nature of life, actually. The nature of life in the eternal realm or in the formless realm is changeless, right? And if we want to call that God or universal source or creative reality, whatever, pardon me, it's changeless, it's spirit, it's all is one forever, right? I don't think I need to wrap that up too much more than it is, but it's all encompassing, all pervading. It's a singular experience of self, a singular reality. Here in the here in the dream world, however, we seem to find ourselves in a very separated situation where the nature of life on earth is constant change versus constant changelessness in eternity. However, seen rightly, the singular nature of changelessness is the same as the singular nature of constant change. Therefore, as above, so below, life is reflected in a singular nature of self, above and below. Just here, it's different from there. And I'm saying here and there as if they're separate places and separate, just for now. Just makes it a little bit easier to try and explain, to use those sorts of ideas. But the mirror then comes into play as an experimental tool at first, and then a very useful tool once you begin to realize that your experiments bear fruit, where I can look at my relationships, where I can look at the situations, pardon me, situations and events and relationships that I find myself involved in, whether that be at work, my home life, my social life, all these sorts of things, and begin as an aspirant of truth, as a person who has chosen anew for the pursuit of inner peace as their state of mind, right? Inner peace is mental health. Say it, inner peace is mental health, right? A chaotic mind is mental ill health or mental, whatever it's called these days, mental distress, right? So as you're pursuing inner peace, which is a spiritual perspective, we learn tools along the way. The mirror then shows me what I need to see for the correction of my perspective to bring into alignment firstly, realization that I'm seeing dualistically or seeing through the eyes of separation, so that I can, in effect, bring about an idea of healing in my mind through an action of forgiving myself for that old perspective and being willing to take on board, and willing is the key word there, being willing to take on board a new perspective that is not of my own making and which I can't possibly comprehend other than by an experience of it. Okay? Now, there's a few things in play here. There's the cyclical nature of my relationships, and if you've ever noticed that maybe a particular person or situation or event triggers you, activates you, pushes your buttons, pisses you off, whatever, then what you've actually noticed is a catalytic point in one of your cycles. And I say one of because we could say that there are many. There is actually only the one which gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you go. But we'll say many because it seems to show up as many in different relationships and situations and events. There is only one, and it's always a reflection of the nature of belief in separation. So as I'm having my cause and effect relationship going on with this person or situation, I'm triggered. All of a sudden they say something, somebody says something, I'm triggered. And there is an opportunity to either react to the trigger and perpetuate the cycle so that it comes around again, because the lesson will repeat until it's learned, or break the chain, break that cycle of interacting with the trigger's the perception of things as my trigger would tell me that I have, and step back. Right? I see what I'm doing in my mind. I'm reacting to something. If this is just a dream, if it is just an illusion, and reality is actually formless, and that and I didn't cover this bit particularly, but if I am actually stuck in a loop, right, of birth and death, and I'm pursuing salvation through an avenue of inner peace, then becoming aware of my triggers is helpful, because it helps me to not only correct my perception, but to foster inner peace and to learn to maintain it. Right? So as I go through my relationships, and let's say my spouse or my kids or whatever trigger me, instead of, and this takes some mind training, instead of reacting, which is that first voice, I just want to go blah and say something, I'm going to step back. And I'm going to ask for the healing of my mind. Now I'm going to ask my higher mind. I'm going to ask my reasonable mind to intercede for me through prayer. Let's say we can call it prayer quite easily. We can call it prayer through the prayer of the heart for the healing of the mind that is witnessing what it believes to be a situation separate from itself in this situation. If you actually thought that you weren't separate from the situation, you wouldn't react at all. You would just realize, this is my thoughts being reflected back to me. These are my ideas. This is my mind showing me something that I want to reject, that I want to react to, that I want to put at bay or keep at bay, rather than allowing it in and undergoing the devastation for a moment, perhaps, of the loss of self-identity that I had previously built based on keeping it out there at bay. Right? And everybody builds their own identity for themselves as they go along. But of course, the nature of life here being change, that also has to change. The reason that we resist change so much is because somewhere in the back of our mind, somewhere in our higher mind, if you like, we're completely aware of the nature of life as being changeless. And so we sort of tell ourselves, if I can just maintain my life as it is, with these beautiful surroundings, these lovely friends, and this income and everything else like that, and if it just doesn't change, I'll find peace. And that's not true. It will always change. It's like somebody trying to hold back the little boy with his finger in the dike, trying to hold back the tides. Eventually, you're going to have to go and have something to eat and drink, and things are going to get in, and you just cannot stop change here, no matter what. Unless you were to completely numb yourself down, feel nothing and experience nothing. And I have had many people tell me that they feel like they're an empty husk. They feel like they're dead inside. Right? And that's the result of doing that. So in the idea of looking in my mirror, I've been triggered. What is it then in my mirror that I see in that person? What am I going to give it a name of? What am I going to call it? I could use the 7 deadly sins just as a loose example here, and just, do I see an envious person or a jealous person or a greedy person, or whatever it is, and I need to own it, right? I need to own it. I need to accept that, hang on a minute, I'm seeing something in somebody here which isn't true, because if I am eternal and I am spirit, then so is that other one, so is that reflection, so is that brother, so is that other living being, also the same as me, because we are all one. Okay? So I need to accept for myself that, hang on, I'm seeing a story about someone or something or some situation that my mind is inventing as a way of keeping me completely preoccupied with the physical nature of life to prevent me from experiencing the illumination of my mind or the experiential nature of life as being eternal. Right? And as I use my mirror, as I take responsibility for my reflections, I begin to edit my old script of death. I begin to edit my old script of I'm a body, you're a body, we're separate from each other. And I'm taking things on board as, hang on, this is not another person's situation or event separate from me. This is my reflection in the journey of my soul. This is actually an opportunity for healing. And I begin to look more intently. I begin to be more honest about the reflections I get, and I begin to accept them and own them as my own thinking, because I would not know what anything was unless it was my own thoughts telling me. If I see a jealous person out there, it is because I still retain what it is in my own mind that the mechanisms and conceptual associations that justify jealousy are in my thinking. It doesn't do any good to try and be right-minded or right thinking, because all I'm attempting to do is avoid what's actually going on in the running program or in the background of my mind. And eventually the reflection in my mirror is going to become so insistent, I'm going to have to look at it. I'm going to have to take it on board, because it's the only way that I can heal it is by taking responsibility for it. I can't push it away, push it down, pretend it's not there. I mean, all these things are just attempts at denying the very, very obvious. So I look at my reflections in my mirror and I say, this is me. I'm not separate from this. Now, I'm willing to offer that to my higher mind through the spirit of love, through the spirit of wholeness, through the spirit of brotherhood, whatever, for the purpose of the reunification of my thought system, for the purpose of the reunification of my way of seeing, so that I might see altruistically, seeing the common good and the common nature of life as being whole and perfect and eternal in everyone and everything. Right? So as I go through my mirror, I look at this person, this situation, this event, take responsibility for it, become willing to forgive that in my own mind, breaking the synapse response memory banks, if you like, or I don't know quite how to phrase that, but your synapses in your mind are a series of pathways where information that has a similar kind of framework comes together to locate things and to reference things in time and space, so that you can recall things and put stuff into a little pigeonhole and categorize it for your own use and need later on, or to recall things from the past. Right? That's how the psyche of the mind works. Psyche, of course, coming from the Greek, to think and to remember. Okay. We don't want to think, we don't want to remember, we want to be. Because in the here and the now, I can be at peace. In the here and the now, I can be in love. I can experience life as it is, not as I think it should be based on things that happened to me yesterday or 10 years ago, or might be in the future. So I look into my mirror and I clean a little patch of my mirror, which is obviously dirty because I'm not seeing the reflection perfectly. I'm not seeing the perfect Christ or the perfect Buddhahood of my brother or sister or whatever it is out there. And I'll just stick with the idea of brother because it's a singular nature, meaning all of the one kind. We've got a rather noisy visitor coming up the driveway. And I begin to heal my mind of not only that way of seeing, but the effects of that way of seeing, which is what it is that's brought to me in my relationship that has triggered me in the first place. So that the next time that cycle comes around, if the prayer of my heart has been honest for the healing of my mind regarding the duality that I'm maintaining in that situation, rather than taking it on full bore as my own reflection, I won't be triggered by it again. Or perhaps I'll notice it and I'll be like, wow, that would have really triggered me at one time, and now it's all good. Like I don't even react. I don't know why I reacted before. and you just go on to the next relationship and the next one and the next one, right? If you've bought yourself a copy of A Course in Miracles and you're doing the workbook lessons, you'll probably start to formulate some kind of an idea regarding that. Those practices, although the workbook lessons are quite spanned out over a year and they're not specifically putting everything into a nutshell the way I'm doing it now. But of course, if you read the reviews of the first 50 lessons, which is just at the end of the first 50 lessons, you will be able to nutshell the entire thought system of the course. And as a daily practice, I highly recommend you to read that little reviews of the first 50 lessons until it becomes embedded in your psyche, embedded in your consciousness, so that when you do find yourself in confrontation with the situations and events of your experience on Earth, you won't be confused about what the purpose of those confrontations is, right? It's always going to be healing, right? Everything is always going to be a lesson or a blessing. Be grateful for both. You may not like the lessons, but if you refuse to learn them, they're going to come around next time and they're going to be puffed up and they're going to be more insistent in their veracity because of the denial that you've placed upon them last time, right? You actually give them power over you by denying them, okay? So that's about it. I highly also, if you can get an original copy of the first version of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, I recommend you grab that little book and have a read. It's very beautiful, especially if you're a beginner to the spiritual domain. It covers an awful lot of things that you'll find very helpful, especially if you go from that to reading something like Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, A Course in Miracles. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, of course, as a book that any beginner can, and Illusions also by Jonathan Buck, any beginner can enjoy and begin to come into contact with new ideas about their place in life on Earth, rather than those which are presented by the government, the education system, and people that have perhaps raised you with no clue like yourself, so that you can begin to make a change in the status quo of things as far as the psyche of the human mind goes. And together we can begin to raise up the vibration of peace and love on this planet, across this universe, into the multiverses, and everything being one, the entirety of the creative source of, or the creative experience of life participating as witness to itself, can begin to enjoy it, right? There is no need to suffer. There is no need to struggle. There is no need to bang your head against a brick wall. But there is indeed a very great need to train your mind. Otherwise, you're allowing the monkey in there to tell you what to do at every tick of the clock, and you're wondering, why is it like this? It's like this because you don't train the monkey. Train your mind. Learn to be peaceful. Learn to be still. Pray. Meditate. And open to the experience of the divinity that is within you and all around you, as this great experience of what we call the human condition. I love you. Peace.